Diolch am ymuno gyda ni heddiw ar gyfer cyfarfod rhythwyr Bwrdd Ymddiriedolaeth Prifysgol Velindre. Good morning and welcome all to Velindre University NHS Trust Board's virtual meeting held in public. Byddwch yn gallu arsylwi y cyfarfod heddiw, ond ni fydd cyfle i chi gyfrannu. Rydym yn recordio'r cyfarfod a bydd copi ohono ar gael ar ein gwefan yn fuan. You join us today as observers, which means you cannot participate in the discussion. A video of the meeting will be available on our website as soon as possible. Cadeirydd y cyfarfod heddiw yw Cadeirydd yr Ymddiriedolaeth, yr athro Donna Mead OBE. Mae 6 aelod annibynnol arall gan y bwrdd fel y gwelwch o'r wybodaeth ac gyflwynir. Today's meeting will be chaired by the Trust Chair, Professor Donna Mead OBE. As you can see from the slide, the board also includes 6 independent members. Yn ymuno â nhw, mae aelodau bwrdd gweithredol y Ymddiriedolaeth. Joining them today are the Trust's executive board members. Croeso hefyd I rai o'n partneriaid allanol. We also welcome some of our key external partners to today's meeting. Mae'r bwrdd yn gyfrifol am reoli perfformiad a strategaeth yr Ymddiriedolaeth. The board is responsible for the strategy and performance of the Trust. Bydd y cadeirydd yn agor ein cyfarfod yn awr. The Chair will now open our meeting.
Bore da pawb, a croeso cynnes iawn I chi gyd. Welcome everyone to the Velindre University NHS Trust Extraordinary Public Board Meeting being held today, Tuesday the 14th of June 2022. This meeting is being convened as an extraordinary public board meeting in order to receive the Trust annual report and accounts for the period 2021-22. I apologise for the slightly late start of this meeting. Some of our colleagues were having technical difficulties in joining with Zoom. So hopefully we can make up a little bit of time as we go through the meeting. If colleagues wish to ask a question, could you raise your hands electronically, and I'll try and keep a close eye on that, and will be assisted by our board secretary and chief operating officer Lauren, who will also be keeping an eye to make sure that I notice that there is a hand up and that we take questions in the order in which people put their hands up. So please use the electronic hand. If I can go to item 1.1 on the agenda, which is apologies. I've received apologies from Stephen Harries, our interim vice chair, and Kath O'Brien, chief operating officer, just about half an hour ago sent her apologies as well. I don't have any other apologies. Is anybody aware of any that I need to note? Oh, Emma, you want to mention Simon, do you?
Yeah, Simon, he isn't here yet, and I suspect he will be tied up for quite some time, but I will cover if he's not here by the time our slot comes up.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to welcome in attendance today our regular attendees, and a warm welcome also to colleagues from Audit Wales and Internal Audit who are joining us and presenting items which are on today's agenda. That includes Steve Wyndham. I've seen Steve. Yes, I can see Steve. He's in my top right. Financial Audit Manager for Wales Audit. We're expecting Simon Cookson, Head of Internal Audit, but as Emma says, he might be held up for a little while, but Emma will cover for Simon. And to yourself, Emma, Interim Deputy Head of Internal Audit, and thank you for agreeing to present any reports on Simon's behalf should he not be able to join us. Item 1.30 on the agenda, are there any declarations of interest which haven't already been made which are pertinent to the items on today's agenda? Could you please declare them now? No? Thank you. So this is a very important meeting in the trust calendar, as I said, to sign off to receive the accountability report and the annual accounts and sign them off. And we need to be presenting them to Welsh Government tomorrow. So it's very important that the things go smoothly for us this morning. So let's see how we go. So item 2.10 is on your agenda is the cover paper for the accountability report and the annual accounts, which I think Lauren, you and Matt between you are going to introduce. So can I hand over to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. And before I start, to say thank you ever so much to Emma for leading, Emma Stevens on the meeting, for leading this work on the accountability report, and her and Claire's amazing teamwork to get us to the point today of having these full set of reports. So thank you so much both. So the accountability report is made up of 4 key areas. So the corporate governance report, the financial accountability report, the remuneration and staff report, and then the parliamentary accountability and audit report. So to focus, I'll focus on a few highlights from within the governance statement. So the information is provided in the governance statement across the whole of the governance and assurance framework of the organisation, including information about the continued impact of COVID-19, in particular during Q3 and 4 of this reporting period, and explains about the reinstigation of goal command and the incident management structure during this time, together with the increased frequency of the Quality, Safety and Performance Committee and board briefings as part of the revised governance arrangements during this period. We also conducted during this year the first annual review of the board's new committee structure following its implementation against a backdrop of the COVID pandemic. And this was supported by a review undertaken of the implementation of the committee structure by internal audit, and the trust assurance framework was also reviewed by internal audit. And as Emma rightly said yesterday in audit committee as well, the importance of those 2 pieces of work is significant, because they not only are important pieces of assurance work in themselves, but the timing of both of them meant that they could feed into the board's review of the committee structure in a really effective way. And in addition, the work of the structured assessment, which was reported on in January, also feeding in. So thank you ever so much, Emma, Simon, Kate, for your contribution to that. We agreed in the March board to maintain the current committee structure for another year. So we'll be reporting on it again in the next governance statement. It also provides details of the board's assessment of its own effectiveness following annual review of that in April, which brought together the various sources of internal and external assurance. And the conclusion was an overall maturity level of 4, which is that the trust has well-developed plans and processes and can demonstrate sustainable development throughout the organisation. And as part of our continuous development, work is underway to review how we can develop effectiveness further and be clear in terms of our own view of the steps to take and the appropriate timescale for those steps to reach a maturity level of 5. And this topic will be discussed in the board development meeting at the end of this month. And as we've agreed as a board, once we have a plan, we'll then have oversight via the audit committee. In addition, one aspect to highlight within the director's report is during the period, we are really pleased to note we have 2 new members of our board. So Professor Andrew Westwell and Vicky Morris, and also the permanent appointment of Kath O'Brien as the Chief Operating Officer. So the development of the accountability report finally has been supported at various stages with input from all areas of the operation. So thank you ever so much to everyone involved. And as I said, for Emma leading and coordinating it. And this final version also incorporates feedback from internal audit, Audit Wales and Welsh Government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lauren. Matt, I'll ask if you want to add anything to Lauren's opening remarks, but just a 2-second warning, Martin. As this report went to Audit Committee yesterday, I just wondered, before we get into the report proper, if you would want to give us a summary of what happened, what was the outcome at the Audit Committee yesterday. So I'll just ask Matt, first of all, if he wants to add to Lauren's introductory remarks, and then if I may, Martin, I'll hand over to you for a brief summary. So Matt, do you want to add anything?
All I'd want to add is my thanks as well to Claire Bowden and Emma Stevens for all of the hard work they've undertaken to produce the accountability report and the financial statements. And then when we come on to the financial reports, I'll do a bit of an introduction, and then Claire will take you through in more detail that section. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. And Claire, your précis executive summary, if you like, was extremely helpful to signpost us through these tomes, if you like. They were very helpful. Thanks, Claire. So with that, Martin, would you like to perhaps give us a summary of the outcome of the discussion of this particular paper at yesterday's audit meeting?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that's probably the best way to do it. We'll come back to each of the individual papers as we go through them. But yeah, we had a very positive audit committee meeting yesterday, with most of the officers who were present today were present yesterday, so we were able to have a full and thorough discussion. That said, there were no changes of any significance whatsoever to the accountability report. I think we picked up a couple of typos, and there might be still a couple more floating through. But it was a really helpful conversation, and the takeaway was that it was a very, very positive report. Lauren's already mentioned the self-assessment, which sets the board's position as at a maturity 4 with an ambition to move to 5. The other main measures of, I guess, success is a good way to call it as any, is meeting our financial target, of which lots more later from Matt, I'm sure. But we met our financial target, all 3 of our financial targets, which meant we broke even, and that means landing a jumbo jet on a postage stamp. We made a £41,000 surplus on expenditure of many, many millions, and that's a miraculous result. We had a 3-year integrated plan, and we also met our creditor payments duty as well, which at one time was looking as though we might not, but we absolutely did. So that's another major achievement. Yeah. The other factors to flag up, of which there are separate reports, but they're all mentioned in the accountability report, is that we got a reasonable assurance report from internal audit. And when I challenged Simon yesterday on, there is a higher level, which is the substantial assurance report. He said in his 8 years of working in NHS Wales, he'd never given out a overall substantial assurance report to any NHS Wales organisation. So we're currently as good as it gets, although that shouldn't stymie our ambition to be better. And lastly, of course, we've got the Audit Wales report, which gives a clean report in terms of its true and fairness duty. Obviously, you'll note that last year we had a qualified opinion last year in the result because of the inability to undertake stock take reports. No such issues this year.
Thank you, Martin. Indeed, all 102 pages of it make for a good read, quite an uplifting read for the trust, given the context of the year that has been reported against. So I agree with you there. I wonder if I might, before I open it up, just raise 1 or 2 queries which are probably presentational more than not material, but I mentioned some of these to Lauren earlier this morning. You may not have had a chance to look at these yet. On page 19 of the accountability report, it looks as though there's a duplicate paragraph which says reported December 2021, and then the next paragraph is reported December 2021. And I'm just wondering, does this refer to 2 separate complaints? Because the paragraphs are almost identical, and I couldn't work out if it was a duplicate paragraph or whether it was a second complaint.
I can see Lauren's put her hand up, but they are definitely two different incidents, and I'm sure Lauren was quite close to the detail of those. If you want to add some more context.
Thanks, I was just going to say, Donna, that well, Matt and I had about 45 seconds quick discussion on this before the meeting, because this is a section of information governance for Matt, and I think you were just going to confirm that with Ian, and we can write out to the board later today to confirm that on those two paragraphs.
Yeah, that's correct, Lauren. I will have a check with the head of information governance, but I think, as Emma's pointed out, it could well be two separate complaints, but I suppose it's about whether we want to present it like that. But I will have that conversation, as I said, with the head of information governance to confirm.
So if it is two separate complaints, I think if that could be noted, because if I, as a member of the public reading this, it looks as though it does look like a duplicate paragraph. And I think just to make that clear would be really helpful.
If I could just come back in there, sorry, Donna. I have spoken to Ian around this, and he has confirmed that they are two separate, but I think we will take on board the point that if it's not clear to the reader, that is important. So we need to just make sure we can distinguish them a bit more if possible.
It just needs to say a second complaint received December 2021. And that's sufficient, I think. We'll clarify it, Emma. Doesn't need any major reworking.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I've got some other points, but I can see some hands up. I'm not sure who was first. I think it was Gareth and then Vicky. Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that page, while you're on it, there are, I think, 2 or 3 references to the Information Commission Officer, whereas in fact it should be the Information Commissioner.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Gareth.
Or it's the office, Information Commissioner's office, but not officer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Gareth. Vicky?
I think it was just to raise, and my apologies because I missed this in my read before Audit Committee yesterday, but picked it up today. It was on page 42 in the governance section. You've got, I've just got the quote, acknowledged in November 22, internal audit review of the TAF. So I presume that must mean November 21 or November 20. It's page 42, top paragraph in the risk and assurance section.
Okay, let me just...
And apologies, Emma, that I didn't pick it up yesterday.
It would be November 2021, Vicky. So
yeah.
Absolutely, that needs to be changed. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Emma, your hand is up.
Sorry, that's a legacy hand.
Legacy hand. Okay. So one or two other queries that I've got, if I may. On page 43, can I just check that when it says SLA, should that be LTA?
No, it would be service level of agreements in that context, Donna. So I believe that's correct. SLAs.
So I thought what we had was long-term agreements with our commissioners as opposed to SLAs.
Want me to comment, Donna? Chair, do you want me to comment? Yeah, so you are correct. We have long-term agreements with our commissioners, but these are referring, as Emma pointed out, to service level agreements. For example, with Cardiff and Vale, we have a service level agreement for pathology services. We also have a service level agreement for occupational health, etc. So it's those agreements which are distinct from the LTAs.
Okay, thanks Matt for that clarification. And then I need to find my next set of notes. The other final query that I've got, Martin, I know you might be interested to note this. On page 80, I can just scroll down to page 80. I'm on 82 now. We've got a table there in which we use the term gender. which I think again that the word that we should use is sex, because in other reports we note that we don't collect information on gender, and male or female are not gender issues, are they? I think they are, they're the sex of the individual. And we have corrected this in a number of our other reports, but it keeps coming through.
You're absolutely right.
I mean, I'll defer to, sorry, Martin.
I was going to say, it starts on the heading at the top, at the bottom of page 79 and onwards. Yes, sex and gender shouldn't be interchangeable.
I would defer to Sarah to confirm in terms of, obviously the remuneration staff report is their section, but I would agree, Donna, I agree with your interpretation, and as you say, Martin, it probably should say sex systematically across them.
Because it doesn't alter the then, well, once that's corrected, then the table is, the tables are as we've seen in other reports, so that's perfectly fine. So those are just presentational issues, not substantive issues. Thanks for bearing with me. It's a lot to read, and perhaps you don't always get the right. Your first impression isn't always the right one, but it's always worth raising issues if you think that there is a query. So I'm going to have a look. Has anybody else got any queries on the accountability report or observations to make? It's very comprehensive, it's very detailed, it's very thorough. I have to say, Emma, thank you, reiterating my thanks to you. I can't see any hands up. And so so the next item on the agenda, and I'll go through the accountability report and all the appendices as we go through them and mention and ask for decisions about approval and so on. So the next next item on the agenda is 21.0B, 21.0B, 0B rather, which is the final accounts, financial accounts, sorry. So Matt, that's handing over to you to introduce the finance report of 21-22.
Thanks, Chair. So as I said, I'll do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to hand over to Claire to take us through some of the more details. So as you pointed out earlier, Chair, Claire did send around a helpful summary of some of the key financial movements from this year, from last year, and some significant figures with explanations. So hopefully, as you said, that's been helpful for people in terms of understanding of the accounts. Also, as already been said, clearly the audit committee met yesterday and had a good opportunity to ask further questions and seek, obviously the board should seek assurance from that meeting yesterday in terms of audit committee's recommendation of the accounts to the board. And then just to say finally that obviously Mark Osland, as the finance director for part of the year, and myself have been reporting to the board in the monthly finance reports, particularly around the 3 key financial targets, as Martin's already pointed out. We were forecasting throughout the year that we would meet those 3 targets, and I can confirm that the final year accounts show these have been delivered, obviously subject to the Auditor General sign off of the accounts. So in terms of financial balance, it's been delivered, remaining within our capital resource limit, been delivered, and also the public sector payment policy for non-NHS has been delivered. So at that point, I'm going to hand over to Claire just to give you a bit more detail around some of the key aspects of the accounts.
Thank you, Matt. I noticed that Simon is trying to join us. I hope somebody's let him in. I can't see, but he was trying to get in, so if someone could look at that, please. And Claire, over to you if you want to add to Matt's introduction.
Yes, thanks, Donna. Yes, just to add a few more points of detail, although I appreciate that a lot of the information's already been covered. The version of the accounts that the committee were content to endorse yesterday was subject to a potential presentation amendment that I outlined in that meeting. Just wanted to say that that amendment has been made and the version of the accounts in the papers is inclusive of it. It was just a presentational point in a note towards the back of the accounts, note 37.1 relating to notional pension funding. Since that meeting, Audit Wales have also highlighted one further amendment which we have made. Again, this time we ensured Matt was happy with that, but of course the Audit Committee were unaware of that when they met. And that was just an amendment to a word on the Statement of Comprehensive Income, which is on page 1. And the line read, retained surplus stroke deficit excluding donated assets received or issued. And it should have said including donated assets received or issued. So we have made that amendment and that is reflected in the version of the accounts that's in front of you. I also just wanted to highlight, as Martin has said, actually, Audit Wales will be presenting later their Audit of Accounts report, also known as the ISA 260. And they will bring your attention to 2 misstatements that we haven't adjusted in the final accounts. Explanation for those is within the letter of representation later in the agenda. Yeah. And again, we talked this through yesterday at the Audit Committee. But just for you to be aware, we felt that as the values in the context that they were reported were not material, they wouldn't impact on a reader's understanding of the Trust's financial position. So we did not make those amendments. Again, something Martin mentioned earlier was that last year we did have a qualified limitation of scope opinion in relation to Audit Wales not undertaking physical stock takes to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to support the closing inventory balance, but there's no such qualification in this regard. And you'll see no matters raised in the audit opinion with regards to stock. Although Audit Wales colleagues will draw your attention to the qualified regularity opinion in respect of the provision for expenditure included within the accounts as a result of a ministerial direction which was issued to the Permanent Secretary in December 19. Whilst last year Audit Wales included an emphasis of matter in this respect in their report, the reason for the qualification this year is because this year is the first year a provision for expenditure is included within the accounts. As I say, Audit Wales will talk more about that when they go through their report later in the meeting. But just to give you just a little bit more information on those financial targets we've already mentioned. On pages 25 and 26 of the accounts, you'll see where we explicitly talk about our financial performance. And the financial duty is to make sure that our expenditure doesn't exceed our income on a rolling 3-year basis. And as you will see, and you already know, we've met that on an in-year and a rolling 3-year basis. The underspend this year of 41,000 is made up of 30,000 for the Trust and 11,000 in shared services. The IMTP, as you know, the process to prepare the 2023 integrated plan was paused as the pandemic hit and temporary measures were put in place. We've complied with those and so we've met the requirements put upon us. On the next page, you'll see our administrative external financing target was suspended again for this year. And while it's been suspended, it is linked to our capital expenditure limit. So it is worth me mentioning here that, as we've said, we hit that target. The Trust as a whole had a capital expenditure limit of almost 30 million, against which it underspent by 27,000. And the core Trust limit was 12.4 million, against which it underspent by about 10,000. Finally, as we've said, the creditor payment target, we hit that. We paid almost 96% of non-NHS invoices within the time frame. And the only other point to note, which isn't a financial target, but the financial statements do reflect the transfer of NWIS financial assets and liabilities to DHCW, and where we thought it would be helpful to flag that in the primary statements or in the notes, we have done so. So that was all I wanted to highlight, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Claire, and Simon, welcome. I'm pleased you've been able to join us. We're still quite early on in the meeting, and we're looking at Appendix A, which is the account section of the annual report. So, Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you invited at the beginning, I'll sort of comment on each of the bits as we go through. I think it's worth saying again, and we had this conversation yesterday, it's quite an extraordinary effort to get this position just 10 weeks after the end of the financial year to be in a position to sign off the accounts of an organisation as complex as this. Emma has helpfully given Claire has helpfully given some summary information, recognising what's happened this year. It's still been a COVID affected year. It's still been a year where headquarters has been closed down for large chunks of the year. It's been a year where auditing has had to be done by and large remotely. We had an NHS transfer at the end of last year, and that's had to be recognised in the accounts. So it's quite a remarkable achievement to get to where we've got to, and to get there with, as Claire said, just two not even material misstatements, neither of which have any effect on the accounts whatsoever. And the point that Claire raises, and we'll have a longer conversation, I'm sure, with Audit Wales around the tax of NHS pensions, that's a ministerial direction. In other words, it's been applied to all NHS Wales organisations.
Yeah.
Other organisations have been caught with this insofar as the actual figures have crystallised, they're able to be calculated. And as soon as that happens, it becomes a matter for an opinion rather than just an emphasis matter statement. So other NHS Wales organisations have been caught in previous years. This is the first year where we've fallen into this, but we are firmly in line with all other NHS, well, the majority of other NHS Wales organisations who've had this for quite some time. So again, I just sort of pass on the thanks as we did yesterday to Matt and to Claire and the entire team, because it's a quite remarkable achievement.
Thank you, Martin. I'm sure we'd all endorse those comments. And I think I was speaking with Steve Wyndham from the Financial Audit Manager. I think Steve is on the call, but I can't see his face right now. Earlier this week, no, back end of last week rather. For such a small organisation, we've got a very complicated set of accounts of there, Steve. I can see you now, Steve. Due to the mainly due to the hosted organisations, particularly shared services, Welsh Risk Pool, and so on, it makes for quite a complicated set of accounts for such a small organisation. And to end up with an end of year report, Martin, as you just said, and in those circumstances, I think congratulations to everybody. We haven't had the internal audit report, the Wales audit report yet, but I mean, I have read it. But I don't want to preempt anything. I'll wait until Audit Wales have presented their report to us. But Steve, you did mention to me how well you'd worked with the team at Velindre, and how they provided you with all the information that was necessary and so on, and towards getting both the accounts ready and for them to be inspected, looked at by Audit Wales. So I'm looking to see if anybody, oh, Steve, your hand went up momentarily and then it came down again.
Yes, I wasn't sure if that was an invitation to comment, but yes, just to comment on that particular point. Obviously, I'll present my report in a few moments, but certainly the level of engagement and support we've had during the audit has been excellent, and we've also received very good quality accounts and good quality working papers. So it's just to sort of reinforce that point, really, which I referred to last week, but it's good to have the opportunity to convey that more formally today. So it's good to put that on record. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's very helpful and very welcome comments to the team that have worked so hard. So thank you very much for that. So that was Appendix B. And now we've got Appendix B2, which is the trust governance and management arrangements. Lauren, are you going to talk to this section?
In my opening remarks, I covered the various points including this section, so no, nothing further to add.
So I can't see any hands up. So we have noted the contents of the accountability report as in Appendix A, and the annual account is in Appendix B. Can I now take you, please, to the letter of representation, which is 2.1.0, gosh, there's so many, IMB. So this is the letter of representation, and it contains some of the matters which Lauren referred to.
Thanks, Chair. So this is an important part of the overall audit. It forms part of Audit Wales, as ISA 260 has been referred to, which is their main findings, which Steve will come on to talk about. So there is a bit of a danger of some repetition here. So it's provided by Steve Ham as Chief Executive and Accountable Officer, and yourself, Donna, as Chair, to the Auditor General. And it's part of, as I said, the audit of the financial statements to support the Auditor General in expressing the opinion on truth and fairness of the accounts, proper preparation, and then the regularity of our income and expenditure. So it confirms to the best of our knowledge and belief that we can make the representations in 3 areas. So the management representation is specifically from Steve Ham as Chief Exec and Accountable Officer, and it's fulfilled through myself and delegated to me as Director of Finance in terms of, as we said, the preparation of the financial statements in accordance with legislation and Treasury financial reporting. It reports on the regularity of the expenditure and other transactions, and also our design of our internal control systems. I'm not going to go through all of the areas, but in that detail. But then the second area is in terms of representations on information provided. So it confirms that we've provided Audit Wales with access to full information with no restriction, and talks about another areas around fraud and suspected fraud, and identification of any irregular transactions, and also related party relationships and transactions. And the final areas in terms of the financial statements themselves, in terms of their preparations and representations around that. And as touched on already, there were no material misstatements identified, apart from 2 areas which have already been flagged, and Steve will highlight in his ISA 260 report. So you can read the letter yourself, and obviously, as I said, it comes from yourself and Steve Ham.
So thanks, Matt. So we have noted the accountability report, we've noted the annual accounts, we've now noted the letter of representation. We earlier discussed the trust governance and management arrangements. And so if there aren't any further queries or observations, before I move to approve, Steve Ham, do you want to, I don't know why I used your second in there because Stephen Harris isn't here, but Steve as Chief Exec, do you want to say anything prior to moving to approval?
No, I'm pleased to be able to sign the letter of rep that we just discussed. I think just agree, support everybody else's thanks to the team who produced an incredibly comprehensive document and successfully delivered an audit program. I know how tricky that is in the middle of everything else that we're trying to do as well. So my thanks to the team.
Thanks, Steve. So I'm moving then. I'm asking colleagues to approve the accountability report, the appendices, letter of representation, and the annual accounts for 2021-22. Are we all agreed that we are approving that? I can't see any hands going up, so I'm taking that's approved. Thank you very much. And of course, the next steps is that the accountability report and the audited annual accounts will be submitted to Audit Wales by tomorrow, and they'll go in as one single unified PDF document together with the annual performance report, which we haven't come to yet, for submission to the Finance, Health and Social Services group in Welsh Government. I'm just checking that that we will be in a position to submit. Now that we've made that approval, we've got a bit of editorial work to do for the accountability report. Presuming, Emma, that will be, you'll be able to manage that, and that the papers can go off by tomorrow.
Donna. Absolutely, Donna.
Yeah, great. So thank you, everybody, for that. We've got lots of very interesting reading in order to prepare for today's meeting. At one point, I started counting up the pages, and then I was kind of losing the will to live a little bit. So we now come to what I didn't mention was Appendix 2, which is the Trust response to Audit Wales regarding trust governance and management arrangements, which would be for noting. Do you want to comment on that, Matt, which is 2.1.0 B Roman numerals 2?
Yeah, it's a detailed response that we provide each year in terms of the governance and management arrangements. It talks about management processes, any awareness of actual or alleged fraud, how we've gained assurance around laws and regulations are complied with, any potential litigations or claims, and then our processes to identify and account and disclose related party transactions, relationships. So what you have there is the previous year's responses and our responses for this year. And it's to give, obviously, Audit Wales assurance, but also ourselves assurance around those governance and management arrangements.
Thanks, Matt. Again, I can't see any hands up. If anybody wants to comment on that, it's pretty straightforward reading. Nevertheless, an important document. So, Martin.
Yeah, again, just to say, Chair, that we discussed both of these additional documents yesterday as well, and noted that the responses for the responses made by Velindre to the questions raised by Audit Wales are consistent with those that were in place the year before.
Thanks, Martin. So we come to section 3, Audit Wales, audit of financial statements. And this is the section that you're going to lead on, Steve. So could I hand over to you, please?
Of course, thank you, Chair. And good morning, everyone.
260, yeah.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm pleased to present you this morning our audit report following our audit of your 21-22 accounts. And essentially, it's here today to inform your decision as to whether you proceed and still intend to proceed to approve the financial statements. So I'll take you through the content, but first of all, I think it's just to give you the high-level message, I guess. Which there's been quite a lot of discussion about various strands and elements within this report anyway. So it's going to be, as Matt said earlier, there's going to be a degree of duplication to some extent, but I'll try and be mindful of that as I proceed through the report. But the high level message is we do intend to issue an unqualified true and fair opinion on your accounts. General is due to certify those accounts tomorrow, and then it'll be submitted on to the Welsh Government. However, again, as also has been flagged, in common with other NHS Wales bodies, we will be qualifying our regularity opinion. And this is in regard to the clinician scheme pays expenditure and income that's included in this year's accounts. And as was being rightfully pointed out, this is not unique to the Trust. It is applying to many NHS Wales bodies this year. There was a lot of discussion yesterday on this report when it was presented to the Audit Committee yesterday. So I think that should give you a degree of comfort, I guess, that the contents of the report and the findings have been given a good airing, a good discussion. But nevertheless, I'll still take you through the main contents of the report, just to give you that sort of information, I guess, to inform that decision about whether you wish to approve or not. If I just then jump in then into the main detail of the report, paragraph 6 of the report refers to some ongoing work that we had, and this was still the case yesterday. There's there's 2 or 3 bullet points there which sort of depict some areas where some current audit work was still ongoing. I'm pleased to say the field work is complete and there's nothing to report to you in regard to those issues. And what I mean by that is there was 2 areas of work that were still outstanding as of yesterday, and that was the work we were doing on income, and also the check-in, the verification, I guess, of the revised accounts. Those pieces of work are complete, and there's nothing to report. So that's good news. But what I do need to flag to you and make you aware, our file review remains incomplete, and this is our own internal review procedures to establish that all the audit work has been undertaken to an appropriate standard. Now, the vast majority of that review is complete, but we're still sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's, I guess, on that review today. So it's unusual, I've got to be perfectly honest, for an issue to materialise at that stage, because we've done 98% of the review, broadly speaking. But there's still a remote chance that something could materialise. It's very unlikely, but I just need to express that sort of caveat. As I said, it's very unlikely. And that doesn't prohibit you approving the accounts today. So don't take that as a message that it's inappropriate for you to approve the accounts. If we did come across something, the accounts would have to come back, I guess, to the board. But as I say, that is very remote, and I certainly don't expect that to be the case.
So we note that in the minutes then, that what you just said, because we will move to approve or not the accounts today, but we'll note your comments in the minutes.
Yes, that would seem very appropriate, Donna. Thank you. But I will let Matt know, and Claire, if there is, either way, when we conclude the audit. But as I say, I will be very surprised if something does materialise. It's cautious language, I know, but I hope you understand the reasons why. It isn't, our audit opinion is important, and I can't prejudge the position.
Well, we got the looming deadline of tomorrow having to submit our accounts to Audit Wales. So we want to be able to do that. Hilary, I can see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On that point, I suppose I'd like some clarification. Is if something was material found this afternoon, I presume it's going to be finished this afternoon, how does that leave the status of the accounts?
They come back, is that right, Steve?
Well, if we do, let's stress, this would be highly unlikely, I feel. Okay, so that's the first point to make. But say, hypothetically, something did arise from our review and it did warrant further work and it was sufficiently weighty, it will mean the accounts wouldn't be submitted in accordance to the deadline, and the accounts might have to come back to another trust board meeting of this nature. But as I say, that is unlikely, and I certainly don't want to raise an expectation of that event occurring. It is a remote possibility.
Thank you, but I think as a board we should understand what the implications of this could be. Would it be qualified accounts? Would they become a qualified?
No, not necessarily. If it is a material issue, and again I stress this is unlikely, but if it was a material issue, it's likely the accounts would be subject to amendment. If there was disagreement over the amendment, then we could be talking about a qualification. But we jump in on a number of steps here. I do feel that is an unlikely event. I suppose I'm stressing the fact that whilst our review remains incomplete, which I do expect to complete today, there's still a very remote possibility that there could be something on the file that's going to pose an issue. But it's very remote, as I say. I keep stressing that. But it's just my duty really to make you aware of that particular position, just in case something does materialise.
So Steve has got his hand up, and Matthew. Before I go to you, Steve, you were first up. Could I, to Steve Wyndham, say to you, is there anything that we could have done that we haven't done to enable you to have completed your work in time for this meeting?
No, that's a very good question, Chair. And it was something I was asked for something very similar at the audit committee yesterday, and I'll give a very similar response really. And that's the stress really. This has got nothing to do with any lack of engagement or any poor sort of response or support from officers. So quite the contrary, as I said earlier, this is more to do with the challenging timetable. You know, we've talked about that in terms of the accounts preparation. This is a similar sort of timetable in regard to our work. We've had some of the issues we've identified this year have had a degree of complexity, so they needed a bit of working through with officers. And the final point, which I referred to yesterday as well, just being totally honest, we're being slightly on the back foot this year because our audit work in regard to 2021 did sort of slip later into the audit window, and than has occurred in previous years, which has meant that we started our audit work slightly later this year, and therefore more audit work had to be done in the final accounts window when we had the draft accounts than what would normally be the case. So it's a combination of factors really, but it's certainly not due to any issues within the trust.
Thank you, Steve. So going to our other Steve now, Steve Ham.
I'm not sure whether Matt wants to come in first.
I knew you were going to say that. I absolutely knew you would say that. So Matt,
it's that bit of being an accountant and a former DOF brings me to put my hand up to that, but we'll let Matt.
Okay. Matt?
Well, no, it's just a specific response to Hilary. I mean, in terms of, it doesn't mean the accounts will be qualified. We'd obviously have to understand what the issue is. There may need to be some further testing to understand what the implications are. And I suppose in my 7 years as a DOF, so in my previous role a long time ago, I produced six years of financial statements, audited, and then obviously this year I've not come across a situation where a file review would result in that circumstance. But as Steve's pointing out, he's got to flag that as a potential issue. But I would suggest it should be highly unlikely.
Thanks, Matt. I've got a question, but Steve Ham might be about to answer it for me. Gareth, do you want to come in? I see your hand is up. Shall I let Gareth come in, Stephen? You wrap up at the end? Okay, Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. I was just interested to understand what is the consequence if we were to miss the submission date tomorrow, because that is likely to be the consequence if Audit Wales finds something in the file review.
First of all, again, it's unlikely. The vast majority of our file review is complete. But it's not fully complete. So let's be clear on the circumstances here. So I think it's unlikely an issue will materialise. And if the accounts were submitted late, which again to stress is unlikely, there's no consequence as far as I'm aware. This is it's not a statutory deadline. It's a submission target for the Welsh Government. That's my understanding of the position.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve. We might, if we're facing that, that's something we need to know, don't we, Gareth, the consequences if we're facing that. So, Steve Ham, get the final.
Yeah, I just add to Matt. I mean, I've also done many of these, both on both sides of the fence. I've never got to that stage over this sort of period. It's just highly unlikely, as Steve points out, and particularly as all the big numbers have been reviewed in details. It's a file review to make sure for quality purposes that everything's okay. So it would be very unlikely, but as Matt said, we would react really quickly if it did, and we'd have to establish an arrangement with the board if we had to have a conversation. So that would be our response. But it's highly unlikely, as Steve keeps on emphasising, given where they are.
So, so thank you, Steve Wyndham, for presenting the ISA 260 report, which we have discussed, we've noted and we've discussed it. What I need some advice on now, I'm looking to you, Steve Ham. Sorry to use your surname, with two Steves in the room. I need to do that. do we make our approval of the accounts conditional on the final pieces of work that Audit Wales have to undertake? Or can we just approve the accounts?
Personally, I think we can approve the accounts.
Sorry, Chair. I'm looking for an appropriate opportunity to sort of rudely interrupt. But I probably, there's still a few elements of the report I probably should comment on. I stopped at paragraph 6 and I haven't proceeded to go.
Oh yes, sorry. You're absolutely right. Thank you for that. Absolutely right.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There's not a great deal to say really, because there is a lot. The key issues in the report have been discussed, and we had a very useful discussion about the status of the audit, about where we're at. And like I said, you know, it would have been easy for me to say all work's complete, we're good to go, sort of message. But as I say, it's my duty to let you know with precision where we are in regard to the audit. And it's just this one small element outstanding, which we hope to wrap up today. So I think we got to a conclusion on that. So, and I'd update Matt later in regard to that particular point. But in terms of the rest of the report, like I said, we intend to issue an unqualified opinion. I'm pleased to say the issues in regard to stock, as been referred to earlier, we've had no such issues of that nature this year. So we've got an unqualified opinion, but we will be issuing a qualified regularity opinion, which to reiterate, is not unique to the trust whatsoever. There's been commentary as well during the course of the meeting in regard to 2 uncorrected misstatements. I wouldn't go through them in great detail, but happy to answer any questions on them. But suffice to say, neither of them are material, so they have no consequence, no impact on our audit opinion. They're included in the report just for your information, so you're aware of the issues, and commentary has also been included in the letter of representation as to the reasons as to why these adjustments are not being made. And subject to your agreement, we are content with those explanations. So it's very much just for information. Paragraph 21 then refers to some audit adjustments that have been made. Again, I wouldn't go through those in any great detail because Claire's given quite a very good sort of explanation in regard to the accounts. But suffice for me to say as to sort of a statement on those, none of those are material and none of those adjustments have had any impact on your closing position. Your 41k surplus for this year has remained intact. That remains unchanged. And the final sort of comment I'd make on the report is in paragraphs 22 to 23, there's reference to our findings in regard to some bonus payments that shouldn't have been made, but that's been corrected. Arrangements have been in place to sort of recover those payments. So there's no further action in regard to that particular issue, no impact on our audit, but it's just reported in this report for your information. And that's pretty much all I wish to say on the report, but very happy to take any further questions.
Martin's hand is up. I'll come to you in a second, Martin. I think paragraph 13 is important for us as well, in which it says a ministerial direction. I'm referring to the regular payments for clinicians. Doesn't make regular what would otherwise be irregular, but it does move the accountability for such decisions from the accounting officer to the minister issuing the direction. The direction. So, Steve, that's a helpful statement for you to read there. So even with that matter of qualification, it's important to have that that statement in the IS 260. Martin, please, and then Gareth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, we had, as Steve indicated, we had a detailed conversation about all of the items in this report yesterday at Audit Committee. And just to bring those points of emphasis back again, the report is an unqualified report, which is a pleasant outcome given where we were this time last year and the surprise of the stock take qualification we had last year. However, it does have that follow the ministerial direction. We do have a qualification regarding that, and again, as I said earlier, that applies to all NHS bodies to which this has happened in Wales. It's worth mentioning here that this is not the case in England. where a almost identical ministerial direction was made by the Department of Health, and that led the Welsh ministers to make the declaration back in 2019. So in England, they have the same regulation and they have the same accounting treatment, yet the NAO and the Comptroller and Auditor General, the good Welshman that he is, decided not to qualify the accounts in England, yet we have got qualified accounts in Wales. So somewhere down the line, I'll be asking the Audit Committee to have something to look at that and just work out why Wales is different to England in that regard. I understand accounting judgments are exactly that, they're judgments. However, it seems very strange that we have two different 180-degree differences of opinion on the same guidance. But that's for another day, but I guess it's just fair warning. Other than that, I think it's a very positive set of accounts. One of the items that has been brought up as a misstatement, again, has been directly done as a result of Welsh Government guidance to us not to do the adjustment. And the other one is a fully depreciated asset, which means that there is no impact on I&E whatsoever. So again, a very, very good set of reports. And again, thanks to Steve and his team, who've obviously been under pressure. And I think, as he indicated, have been playing catch up, obviously, because the COVID. I think the analogy I used yesterday, I will use it again, or not to any way decry Audit Wales, is to say they don't have spare auditors lying about like spare airplanes. So when times do get tough, there is a knock-on effect if one audit runs late and all the other audits run late and they have to catch up. So just like EasyJet, he doesn't have any spare planes lying around in case they need to deal with it. So given that, and given this is the first of the year, it's a kind of remarkable position to be here just 10 weeks down the line. So thanks to everyone at Audit Wales.
Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Martin. Gareth, please.
Thank you, Chair. A point of detail, if I may, please, on the covering paper in paragraph 2.2. The second sentence, I think, should be amended because it reads, they propose to qualify the audit opinion in respect of the regularity of expenditure, whereas it should say they propose to qualify the regularity opinion in respect of the regularity of expenditure. There's a bit of duplication of the word regularity, but as it reads currently, the first sentence contradicts this. First sentence is contradicted by the second one, whereas so we just need to make it clear they propose to qualify the regularity opinion.
Steve, have you spotted that in paragraph 2.2?
The cover paper. Sorry, we're talking about the cover paper, aren't we?
Cover paper, did we?
Yes, that's not my
sorry, So can we put a form of words that makes that clear, Matt?
Yes, thanks for highlighting that, Gareth. You're correct. It doesn't actually read as it should read, so apologies. We'll get that corrected.
Thank you.
As soon as you pointed out, it's as plain as a nose in your face, but I didn't spot it. So thank you, Gareth, for that. Matt, your hand is up. That's a there you are. Your hand is down now. Okay, so as far as so Steve, you finished your report. Are there any more comments, queries, observations for Steve? So we're asked to review, which we've done, and to note this report. And in relation to our accounts, taking the advice from our Chief Executive, we approve the accounts, and hopefully, Steve, things will turn out exactly as you predict. Thank you all for that. So now we come to section 4, which is the head of internal audit opinion and annual report, which, Simon, you're going to introduce this item to us. Thank you very much. So I'll hand over to you, Simon.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I'll be very brief with this, as most members of the board, I think, saw a draft of this back at the Board Development Day that you had toward the end of April as well, and the final version of the report, along with the other papers, was discussed and received by the Audit Committee yesterday. I think, Chair, the key things for me to note is that we have concluded overall a reasonable assurance in terms of the governance, risk management and control arrangements of the organisation that we've looked at and the other information that we have taken into account. And you can see on page 5 in the executive summary, there were no limited assurance reviews this year, notwithstanding that improvements were of course identified in the reviews that we did do. 3 were substantial, 13 reasonable, 2 did not have an opinion as they were supportive advisory pieces, and there is work ongoing as there has been over the last couple of years around the new cancer centre, and that programme of work will continue. Section 2 takes you very quickly through the background to what we do, our responsibilities, how we comply with the standards, and summarises the work that we have undertaken, all of which has been considered by the Audit Committee as part of its responsibilities during the course of the year. Section 3 just highlights the fact we do use the results of work that we do at NWSSP and now at DHCW to inform our opinion where that work has a wider implication. So obviously with NWSSP, payroll and accounts payable. Section 4 summarises KPIs and Section 5 covers the objectives of the reviews that we did. And most of what is in the report is there because it's a requirement of the standards that we operate to. So there are some process points within that. But overall, as I say, Chair, it's a positive report, no significant issues for us to raise with you or the board. And it just remains for me to thank all of the Trust Board and those officers who've supported us during the course of the year to help us complete our programme. And happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. And again, thank you very much for coming to our board development session, you know, because we were able to go through this with time, you know, plenty of time to reflect on what this report is telling us, which you don't always have that luxury of time in a busy business agenda. So we were very grateful to you for coming to that meeting. Are there any observations or queries for Simon? This is clearly a very welcome report. Martin, please.
Again, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, we received this paper along with the others yesterday at Audit Committee, and it's very pleasing to note that whilst the overall assurance level is a reasonable assurance level, which is as good as Simon ever gives out, I think looking at the individual audits, you will note that they all fall into the substantial and reasonable assurance category. There's no limited assurance, let alone any ones which have no assurance at all. We should take great heart from that. And whilst of course we continue to strive to move things into the green, fully substantial assurance and out of the reasonable, to have everything up clearly above the line is very heartening and a very good performance. So the thanks don't just go to Simon and his team for production of this report, but actually for everybody in the Trust for the work they've done to get us to this place and making sure that standards have not slipped through COVID and through all the other pressures we've had in the organisation. It isn't just a governance matter and it isn't just a finance matter, it's a whole organisation matter. And I think it'd be very good if the board could pass those sort of a kind of vote of thanks to the whole organisation, because it is a whole organisation process to get us to where we are on this.
And we want to be in the same place next year.
Or better, of course.
Or better, of course, or better. Thank you, Martin. So we note the contents of that report. Thanks, Simon. I don't know if you, before I move on, Emma, if you wanted to add anything to Simon's comments.
No, just thanks to everyone for supporting and getting the work done, and let's keep up the good work and take it forward into this year.
Thank you. So we come to section 5 on the agenda, which is our annual performance report for 2021-22, and I'm going to hand over to Carl to introduce this item to us. Just found it on my papers, waiting for it to load up.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Morning, everybody. So just talk a bit about process first. So the cover paper just sets a couple of important points just to raise in the cover paper. Obviously, the annual performance report is part of Chapter 3 of the Manual for Accounts, and this report follows the guidance which is set out at Annex 7. And as has already been mentioned this morning, this report for 21-22 is in the context of a sort of a COVID environment. So that was the framing of this, hence a one-year report against the one-year IMTP, which was broadly framed around, as you recall, a 21-22 delivery plan and the 4 harms. That was the national guidance. And a couple of things which are worthwhile drawing to the board's attention before we get into the report of itself. The cover paper sets out the observations raised on the previous draft and as Paras 2.5 by the Quality and Safety Performance Committee. So improving the narrative around NHS Wales Shared Services Partnership, making sure it's very clear about the relationship there. Also the glossary, lots of acronyms and terms used in the glossary terms are set out. And then perhaps more importantly, and as importantly, some really important observations around focusing on outcomes in terms of the measurement and triangulation between the various measures, improving the narrative so everybody understands how we're performing, it's clear for all stakeholders. And lastly, how we benchmark and compare ourselves with other organisations to ensure we learn from others. So that's really what the cover paper sets out. If I therefore just take the board to the actual report itself, I'm not going to go through the report. What I thought it may do, Chair, was just draw out a couple of the key points from the report itself. And really, hopefully, put forward to the board, this report sets a really successful year for the organisation in its endeavours. And if we look at the core delivery of core services, I think what the report demonstrates, notwithstanding quite a challenging year for the reasons we've viewed this morning and prior, we have and continue to deliver high quality, safe, person-centred care, which provides a good experience for both cancer patients, for blood donors and all of those people related to those individuals, but also really high quality service for our partners, so health boards, third sector partners and a range of others. I think the second thing it also demonstrates is our research, development, innovation continues to thrive. And there's some great examples in there of the work that's been done as part of core service, but perhaps importantly, demonstrating that the research, development, innovation actually drives better quality of care as well. It's not just done for doing its own sake. I think the other thing to draw out really would be around some of the things we really did have to deliver. The partnership across the health boards in South East Wales to really get ahead of the Nuffield Trust recommendations. That's coming through into the report and also into core day-to-day service delivery for patients. And lastly, there's strong message in there around putting things right and learning from any concerns, complaints, and making sure that we do improve continually the quality of service day to day, month to month, year to year. So that's the sort of core element of the report. I guess there's another second part, which is the things that we were able to do in sort of strategic development terms throughout last year, notwithstanding the fact we're also dealing with the COVID environment. And if again, I could draw the board's attention to a couple of key themes. I think the first really around organising principles. And what we have been able to do is really strengthen our approach to really starting to embed and live the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And you'll see some really strong and important work across the whole organisation there around sustainability, both in terms of our strategic approach, but also the tangible benefits that have been delivered from a more sustainable way in which we're taking forward our services, and also some really good examples of the Welsh Language Act and that sort of cultural importance for us as a Welsh organisation. We've also been able to refresh our strategic intentions, and all the board has been involved in, and most of the organisation has been involved in, reframing our approach for the next 10 years. We now have our 2032 strategy, our 5-year service strategy for cancer and blood, and also our sort of support things which we know will become more important over the coming years around how we attract, retain and enrich the best talent, how we support that with digital, and how we really then have great places for people to work and visit, so that really feel that high experience. And that will translate into our 3-year IMTP, which is touched on in the report itself. Last thing which we have managed to do, I think, during this last year, is really stay on track with some of the key infrastructure programs and programs of transformation across the organisation. colleagues will be aware of the exciting work that's been finalised at the minute over in the blood service around the refurbishment of the Talbot Green building, and also new equipment's gone over into the service over there, and also similarly within the cancer service. So we are at the tail end now, thankfully, of the procurement for the new IRS, the integrated radiotherapy solution. So 10 new Linacs. We've closed the competitive dialogue for the development of the new cancer centre, and also we've completed the FBC, the final business case for the new radiotherapy satellite centre down in Abergavenny. So again, you know, huge pieces of work which the organisation and its partners have really focused on, and we're getting to the tail end of the planning stage and into delivery, which will again deliver huge and tangible benefits for the population of Wales for the foreseeable decades, and I think that's a really important point to make. So the last thing the report sets out is challenges, and there are many. I think they can also be opportunities. So some of the things we know already we'll focus on continuing going forward. I think the first and foremost is the continuous improvement of safety and quality and experience of services day to day, week to week, month to month. How we return post-COVID, make things better. Workforce challenges, how we attract and retain the right people. And perhaps most importantly, the well-being of our staff, our patients, our donors, and all the people we serve in the communities across Wales. So I think that's what the report sets out. A really successful year. There are some areas clearly where we will always want to do better. But I think through the hard work of all the organisation, we can be hopefully quite proud of the level of service we've delivered in 21-22, and that does provide us with another strong foundation on which to launch into our sort of next 3 to 5 years from an organisation perspective. Happy with colleagues to take any outstanding questions.
Thank you, Carl. Everybody can see that the work has been unrelenting. So I'm just wondering if any of I'll call you in a second, Andrew, if any of the exec directors wish to comment on aspects that come under their jurisdiction in relation to this report. Nicola or Sarah or Jazz? No? We speak as one, but Nick.
Yeah, just to add to what Carl said around the processes around, putting things right and learning and improving. This year we've seen a seismic shift in respect of how we do deal with concerns and when things go wrong, and much enhanced accountability, responsibility at a local level, in particular in the cancer service. And that has resulted in improved compliance with process target like the 30 working days, but actually what it's doing is driving a culture change across the service. Welsh Blood already had very good, robust arrangements in place, but I felt it would be remiss of me not to highlight that, because it's been a whole multi-professional team effort within the cancer service, and that is now making a significant difference to how we are learning, improving and moving forward.
Thank you, Nicola. Emma, we make a note of that, please. Sarah, Andrew, I'm not ignoring you. I just wondered if the directors wanted to talk about their portfolios, really. So Sarah, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you called us in, I think the report clearly indicates the focus that we've put on staff wellbeing, and the fact that obviously that is at the heart of our work and enables us to deliver as an organisation. So I will say that in addition to the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. And I'm very pleased to notice the new staff wellbeing centre that we've developed on Park Road. Steve and I went to look around it, and it's a very appealing premises now for staff. It's got some refurbishment that needs, or not refurbishment, some furniture that needs to go in yet, but it's a very, very pleasant and comfortable environment, Sarah. So I'm hoping that staff will really feel the benefit from that.
Yeah, and we've now appointed the staff psychologist as well, Donna, just to add to that.
Yeah,
we'll obviously also be working from there to some extent.
Thanks, Sarah. Andrew, then please.
Thanks. Terrific report. Thanks to all involved. There's so many positives. Just a thought on in the area of public engagement. There's a lot in here about how we ask patients, for example, of their opinion of the service, and that's for ideas about improvement, but less about patient and public involvement in driving those forward. So I know we do that sort of thing. It just seemed to come out. It seemed to be a little less of a focus on how we involve patient public groups in driving forward development strategy. It's just a thought. I don't want to, meddle with the report because it's all going to be sent in, but something just to reflect on for the future. I spotted one tiny typo as well on page 21 under the well-being, complementary therapy, with an E in the middle rather than an I, because that changes the meaning. But so a tiny detail. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew. Carl, we'll ask, Vicky, your hand is up now, and then Nick. So Vicky, please.
Sorry, it was just to say really as a point of order that we'd asked Carl to bring this onto the main agenda on QSP. So we had an early sight of this report, and obviously comments were taken on board at that stage. So I'm grateful to Carl for considering, and the other execs for considering those issues before this final report. So thank you.
Yeah, it's important to note that, Vicky, thank you. Nicola?
Yeah, just in response to Andrew's comment in relation to patient engagement, as colleagues will be aware, we have now approved our patient engagement strategy for the cancer service. So, there has been, significant work undertaken in respect of re-looking at our systems and processes, albeit whilst we have still been engaging, widely with our patients and also donors in Welsh Blood.
Thanks, Nick. So, of course, we're looking at this report for the year that's behind us, and it is a very good report. But I am mindful of the pressures that the organisation is undergoing forward, which I know you are, Carl, as well, as our director of performance, with the pressures, with the increased volume coming down to the cancer centre and important developments in the Welsh Blood Service. So it's going to be a busy year with some difficult challenges to overcome in the next year, which doesn't detract at all from this report, which we have discussed and we're now asked to note. So we note that. Thank you, Carl, for introducing that report to us. We've come to the end of our scheduled agenda. I haven't been informed of any other business meetings, so I wouldn't expect there to be any other business. But I'm just letting 10 seconds pass, just in case anybody has a burning issue. No. So the date and time of the next meeting is our regular scheduled board meeting, which is on the 28th of July. Oh, I can see Stephen. I've closed the meeting now. Steve,
sorry, I was pressing the wrong button. Sorry. Just in terms of the performance report, you summarised as noting. We need to approve it.
No, you're quite right. No, you're quite right. We're asked to approve it.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah. No, you are quite right. Were you going to say the same thing, Matt? You're on mute, Matt.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to check we did formally approve in terms of the recommendation, in terms of the accountability report and the financial report.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did that.
Yeah, I'm just checking because it was subject to, I think you said, and I'm pretty sure.
No, I think we decided not to put the subject to on the advice of the Chief Exec. We're not putting subject to or conditional upon. We're approving. No. We approved the accounts.
Thank you. Check.
So now we're asked to, I do apologise for that, to approve the annual performance report. It clearly says approve. I don't know why I read note. I was looking at the internal audit report thing above, I think, perhaps just for a nanosecond, and out it came out of my mouth. So, colleagues, I move that we approve the annual performance report 2021-22. Can I ask for your signal that you approve that, please? Thank you. So that's approved. And our next meeting is on the 28th of July 2022.